and welcome back to the Government Information Service National Television Network. We're here in our studios and we are welcoming you to our live press briefing, virtual, as we are practicing social distancing. And as I promised you this morning, we do have Prime Minister Honorable Alan Chastanet with us. We have also the Chief Medical Officer, Dr. Sharon Belmar George. The Executive Director of the St. Lucia Chamber of Commerce, Louisy, is here, as well as the Tourism Minister, Honorable Dominic Fedee. They are at the head table. We do have in the audience as well the representative of the St. Lucia Hotel and Tourism Association, Mr. Sanovik Destang, as well as Marguerite, Desir, who is the president for the St. Lucia Manufacturers Association and also the chair of Export St. Lucia. We want to apologize for the late start of today's press brief. I know I indicated earlier this morning that it would have been at 12 noon. We are somewhere in the region of 37 minutes behind that time. But I also indicated this morning that there was intensive talks happening, and such is the nature that these meetings can go on longer than anticipated. But we're happy that all of the key players are able to be here with us this afternoon so that we can have a special update from our decision makers. I hand over now to Prime Minister Honorable Alan Chastanet, who will make an opening statement.
Thank you very much, Lisa. Again, it's good to be communicating to the general public and giving a more recent update as to the work that we've been conducting over the last couple of days. This coronavirus is a unique episode in the history of St. Lucia. And I think very much like 9/11 and the impact that it had on air travel. So we normally say there's a pre-9/11 and a post-9/11. I think that it's safe to say that there will be a pre-corona economy and there will be a post-corona economy. And so the government of St. Lucia, in terms of its objectives and its priorities, has really been focusing on two critical aspects of this virus. First of all is from a health perspective. And as I've indicated, and I will continue to repeat, the priority of my government has always been with the safety and the health of our citizens at the foremost of our mind. And we've had to make some very difficult commercial decisions, but those decisions were always with the priority of healthcare. And I want to really thank the CMO, who has been at many of those meetings and seen firsthand some of the difficult decisions we've had to be able to make. But we have made those and we continue to make those difficult decisions in earnest. So in terms of a healthcare perspective, first of all is containing and not allowing for the community spread of corona. As we know that we already have 2 local cases or 2 imported cases. Both of those patients, from what I understand, are recovering and are doing well. We've had many solutions. I'm sure the CMO will reflect on the exact number that have been tested since then. And luckily for us, everybody has come up negative so far. And so while we could never say for sure that there is no community spread taking place, we can say that there is no current evidence of a community spread. And therefore, we must continue to add measures to be able to maintain that current position. Because what we cannot afford as a government and as a people is to be having a war on 2 sides. One on a side of health, and if in fact we have a major community outbreak in St. Lucia, in terms of the human hardship that it would create in the country, and certainly the economic stress that would put on the government to be able to make sure that we're making the necessary resources to the health environment to be able to battle this virus. Secondly, we have to be able to deal with the economic fallout that we're seeing and globally and what impact that is going to have on St. Lucia. So here in St. Lucia, what we've been doing right now is prioritizing moving into the OKEU hospital. So I believe that this week the move has already begun in earnest. And as I've indicated in the past, while OKEU under normal circumstances would have been a transition that we would have done later in the year, when you add Corona on top of the decision making, it became very apparent that we had to move into OKU as quickly as possible in order to facilitate using Victoria Hospital as a respiratory hospital. So we're hoping that within the next 5 or 6 days that move would be completed and will be fully operational in OKU, and then we can turn our attention now in fixing up Victoria to be able to accommodate any respiratory cases we're going to have. Luckily, our government had already been taking initiatives over the last 3 years to strengthen our primary healthcare services, as well as preparing OKU for this transfer. So this has really made it substantially easier. So the plans to move in, the staffing, the difficulty that we're going to have, and I really want to applaud both the public health officers as well as the private health officers, that we are not going to be able to depend on the Martinican technical group that we've been working with to assist us on the physical transitioning into OKU, simply because Martinique is on a shutdown. As you know, that they have had an increase in the number of corona cases in their country, and their healthcare centers are really giving a priority to those. And I know that Martinican healthcare providers really wanted to be able to help us, and I know that it pains them that they cannot help us, but I want to really thank the private sector and particularly the public sector officers for really stepping up to the plate to accommodate this transition. The second part of this is to be able to improve the facilities that we have specifically to deal with Corona. And I know, again, the CMO will speak specifically to them, but one is to be able to increase the number of the space that we have for quarantining. So as an example, we have St. Lucians returning from Martinique over the weekend, and we have been able to make arrangements with 2 hotels to be dedicated as quarantine areas, as well as in both of those hotels or in one of them, accommodation will be made for isolation. So the difference is somebody who is a suspected case that's coming from a country that we have known outbreaks in, that we put them into a quarantine. And the quarantine can either be on a voluntary basis or it can be under a regulated basis. And so we really believe the time has come for us, specifically for people coming from countries that have known cases, to actually put them into administered quarantine. Isolation is once now a person has been confirmed as being corona positive. And therefore, the protocols that are in place for those individuals, that we're going to have a specific place to be able to put them. Now, we have 2 types of people that would need to go once they've tested positive for corona. So we have individuals who have normal symptoms, cold-like or flu-like, that we believe that we must contain them in isolation to limit the spread. And then you have, and hopefully we have a limited number of those cases of individuals who have corona and are going to need more care. And so that is why Victoria Hospital is being prepared to deal specifically with those cases. And certainly we'll have people who need basic health care, and then we may have people who need more intensive care, but I believe the CMO is much more capable and appropriate in speaking about those situations. We've also now created 4 centers in St. Lucia that we're calling Respiratory Clinics, in order that people, before they can rush to the hospital, can go to these clinics to be able to get levels of advice and be told what their next steps are potentially going to be. So all those are in place. So the purpose of today's press conference is really to indicate that we have been in intense dialogue with the private sector and with government agencies to determine some of our next steps. And I think on the advice of the CMO, it's really to intensify our level of social spacing in this country. So as such, we have decided that as of Monday, that we're going to implement a heightened protocol on social distancing regimes. So this implement this program will really begin on Monday the 23rd and will be in place until until Monday the 23rd of March until Sunday, April the 5th in the first instance. And certainly depending on the success of that program and what's taking place, and through the advice of the CMO and the collaboration of government, we will determine whether in fact we believe that that should be extended or whether in fact we can now pull back on it. So what we're proposing to close down all non-essential commercial services. And in doing that, we believe that we're going to be able to reduce the amount of public interaction and the intensity of our economy at this point. And those commercial entities that are going to remain open are going to be expected to put in new social behaviors. So if I can take example with the Banks Association, they've spoken about limiting the number of hours that the bank is going to operate. They're also going to have a dedicated hour for elderly people. They're going to have a special line for frontline essential services staffs. And they're going to go on a rotation basis to limit the number of tellers that they're going to have. And they're also going to be trying to push as much of their operations to online operations as possible to limit that level of interaction. And also they're going to limit the number of people that could be in a bank at any one time. So a larger bank, I believe the number is 20, and I think in smaller branches the number is going to be 10. In the call centers, as an example, what they're doing is sending home all of their administrative staff, their human resources accounting staff, and making sure now that the terminals will now be every other booth rather than having people in close proximity to each other, and then using the space that's been vacated by the administrative staff to be able to spread out their call center channels. In terms of government, each of the government agencies are going to be looking at protocols to put in place in order to diminish the number of people that are going to be on call in the office at any one time. So there are too many different protocols for me to go through each one of them, but the principle of what we're attempting to do here remains the same. In terms of essential services, the utilities, WASCO and LUSLEC and the telecoms will remain open, but again, with a revised protocol. Sanitation, collection and disposal, the supermarkets and pharmacies, mini-marts and shop and bakeries, petrol stations, my apologies, air and seaports will be open for cargo handling and potentially, although it is diminishing significantly, some a very limited number of US flights would potentially still be flying. Bus services on a limited basis, limited banking services, trucking services related to goods, and custom services will all remain operational, but again, on a scaled down version of what they were doing. Emergency services, fire, police, as well as the private security services will remain operational. In terms of border control, again, there will be a continual tightening of any humans or passengers coming into St. Lucia. The number obviously has been diminished significantly. We've seen now the notice that the Canadian flights have terminated or are about to be terminated. The flights from England, I think that March 26 is the last day that we're going to see flights operating to the UK. Most of the flights for the last week have literally been coming in virtually empty other than students and St. Lucians returning, and literally being operational to take out the passengers and the vacationers that were here. Yesterday, President Trump escalated travel to the entire world to level 4. So while we have not received any specific information from the US carriers, it is anticipated that we will also lose those flights. I want to say at this point that we should all be aware that we're an island and that there are still many services that we depend on from outside of the world that we cannot provide for ourselves. So the total elimination of flights into St. Lucia I don't believe serves the best interest of us as a country. But we do believe in working with the CMO in restricting the number of flights significantly, as well as creating a higher profile on those individuals. So if in fact people did come in, it would be required that we would know what their temperatures on a daily basis, we would know what their whereabouts are going to be, and that they would stay in constant contact with the CMO's office. On a limited number of people, that is a much more feasible possibility. But I want to say that there are many businesses that may need technical assistance. We may have St. Lucians who cannot get health services in St. Lucia and are going to need to be flown out. And so therefore, trying to maintain some kind of connectivity with the rest of the world is critical. As we know that Trinidad and Tobago has closed its borders. And my understanding is that CAL is going to be ceasing its operations. We cannot go to Martinique because Martinique is now on a shutdown. So the options that we have are extremely limited. And I want solutions to know that this is a very difficult position, but we are at all times weighing on the security of St. Lucians and being able to restrict the exposure that we have when it comes to our borders. We have indicated that no private boats are allowed to come into St. Lucia. And part of that is unfortunately we know that there is a lot of illegal trade that takes place between St. Lucia and Martinique. And so therefore, now that we know that there's not supposed to be any boats in the channel, including the ferries, that it'll make the job easier for the Marine Police. So we have beefed up the Marine Police, or strengthened the Marine Police by adding 2 additional boats, by giving them a larger allocation for fuel, and also in terms of assisting them to recruit 2 more teams to be able to improve the visibility that they're going to have on our borders. In terms of restaurants and fast food services, so basically we are shutting restaurants and bars down for the next 2 weeks, but any drive-through or delivery services will be permitted. And again, this is an attempt to minimize the social interaction we're taking place, but also recognize that people may depend on some fast food outlets or some restaurants. So once they can deliver or they can have a drive-through service, they can remain open. In terms of the private and public sector, the operations of businesses that can continue to deliver services under a working from home environment will be encouraged to do so, and businesses which cannot operate from work home will halt operations for a stated period. So the public service will indicate before Monday all the services that will be provided, but we are trying to keep essential services open for the next 2 weeks, but as I said, on a very limited basis. Our hotels will be only operation, some on a limited basis, based on how quickly they can get the guest out. But once the guests are out, all hotel operations will cease for the 2-week period of time until we can determine what the next way forward is going to be. In terms of determining how we're going to handle the economic fallout, so we have been on watch and on guard for the last month and looking at particular triggers to determine how significant and how deep this fallout is going to be. So certainly, once the U.S. started its initiatives, we were really hoping that they would have had much earlier success than they did. But once we realized that the community spread was taking off, the reality is it's becoming very scary in the United States. So when you went from 500 cases 10 days ago or 12 days ago to where I believe last night I saw in excess of 10,000 cases, and the likelihood is that that number is going to jump significantly in the next 2 weeks. One has to be concerned, one, about the psychology of the American population as to how they react to this, and secondly, the continued, and I have to describe it this way, carnage that's taking place in the U.S. economy. Certainly the same thing has happened in the UK. I mean, the pound has dropped, I think, yesterday to 1.15 or $1.15. The Canadian dollar has dropped significantly. We've obviously seen the stock market continue to be very volatile, but on a downward trend. The Canadian economy, I think that they're proposing the largest deficit in the history of the Canadian economy. So there are very draconian measures that are being taken in those countries to combat corona, but the result of those is creating economic turmoil. And so it would be irresponsible of me as your Prime Minister in any way to suggest to you that this is a 2-week phenomenon. I think it is fair to say that if in fact the US and Canadian steps to control corona are going to work, it's going to take 8 weeks minimum for us to see that turnaround. And we saw how long it took China to be able to curtail the increase in community spread. Once now that you have at least a week or 10 days of showing that you've been able to control the numbers and the numbers have plateaued, it's going to take that economy another 8 weeks minimum to start ramping back up. Now these are all best case scenarios. So we're saying 16 weeks at a minimum. And so my government had made the decision very early that we would treat this, that this is going to take 6 months to recover. And let me emphasize the seriousness of what we're talking about. We're talking about that from next week, for the next 3 months, there will be no tourism arrivals into St. Lucia. 0. And it potentially can be that it's going to take 6 months before we start seeing any tourism arrivals coming back. The impact on us, clearly at a human level, is all the people who are working directly in the industry, which there is over 13,500 people who are currently employed in the industry. And there's another 2,500 to 3,000 people who work on the periphery of the industry, your taxi drivers, the persons who transport staff, your farmers who've been providing meals there, all the attractions, the restaurants and the bars. You start adding up that number. From a government perspective, it is a significant amount of our revenue. So it means that there's going to be a substantial shortage of money coming in, of liquidity coming into the economy. So over the last 3 weeks, my government has been working with the central bank and also international institutions to determine where we can make up the liquidity. And also that we have to start prioritizing our programs. I'm very happy to say that we've had very good discussions with the ECCB, which also now included the Bankers Association. And so this week we had several meetings with the Bankers Association to determine what they can do to help support St. Lucia on a macro basis, as well as now involving the ECCB in terms of what policy changes the bank may have to make in order to facilitate the banks to be able to support the private sector, companies, as well as the government. And I'm going to allow them to make those pronouncements for themselves, but I'm very encouraged by how quickly they have moved and how serious they've taken this issue. And I think, like us, have indicated that they have to look at this as a 6-month phenomenon with the possibility of extending some of the concessions to 9 months. So that's one group. We also have been meeting with the private sector, and I want to thank the Chamber for initiating a discussion with myself and also with the CMO so that the government didn't have to go out to the private sector to seek their support to implement these new measures. The private sector stepped up to the plate willingly. What was important this week is the Chamber represents a certain number of the businesses in St. Lucia. We also had to meet with the Hotels Association, with the Employers Federation, and also with the Manufacturing Association to understand how do we adopt protocols that effectively allow us to move on. So in the case of the Manufacturing Association, shutting down the manufacturers would be counter-cyclical to what we're attempting to do. So companies like Thailand have stepped up to the plate and are producing a lot of toilet paper. We have other companies that are becoming innovative in terms of hand sanitizers. We have companies that are recognizing that we need to be able to produce as much of our own food as possible. So to shut them down would be counter-cyclical to what we're attempting to do here. So all manufacturers that are producing what we call essential goods, particularly in the area of food and in beverages, that we're going to allow them to continue to operate, and we've been given assurances by the manufacturers that they themselves are also going to be looking to put protocols in place to scale down the operation and become more efficient. The same thing is now going to apply to our farmers and fishermen. We need them more than ever before. And so my government will be putting in programs to be able to support them in order to be able to increase their output so that we can become substantially more self-sufficient in feeding ourselves. So in this economic fallout, what we have seen is that the vulnerable of our society are the ones who are going to be most exposed. And so therefore I've asked the Ministry of Equity, starting with the homeless, to work with the Hotels Association and with the Ministry of Tourism in identifying some guest houses to make sure that we could make sure they're taken care of. And remember, many of these homeless are not only vulnerable from a health perspective in that they're elderly and their immune systems are low, but at the same time we must make sure that they are not in the way of any additional exposure. The next one is households, and is to make sure that there's going to be loss of jobs, and there's going to be a reduction, a substantial reduction in income. And this is why I'm saying to all St. Lucians, and I've been saying it before, that we need to start thinking of the word rationing. Now, the word rationing was not put in because I'm scared that the food chain is going to be restricted. That's not what it was for. We are very comfortable, and I've been assured by the grocery store companies here, and I know the capability of our farmers and our fishermen, that I'm not scared that we're going to run out of food. The rationing is because our income levels are going to come down, and people cannot continue to believe that they're going to live at the standard that they have pre-corona. So for the time being, I'm asking St. Lucians to be very careful of what they're consuming and what they're spending. I can only suggest to you that you must hold on to your cash in order to be able to pay for essential items. This is not a time to be spending money on luxury items. We have to work together. And similarly, the government must be in a position to have enough resources to help the more vulnerable and the people who are going to be unemployed, to basically be able to provide them with a minimum amount of money to be able to buy food and to be able to take care of the people in their households. So when people are rushing out to buy endless supplies of product because they're fearful or scared, what you're doing is you're hurting your own fellow St. Lucians. We have to be in this together. We have to be each other's keepers. And the grocery store chains are implementing some quota regimes, and I'm asking for everybody's cooperation to make this happen. And do not believe that there is going to be a shortage of food supplies. The rationing is from an economic perspective, from a household consumption. Hold on to your money and only buy what is essential. Small businesses are going to be impacted. And so therefore, we will be meeting with the small business associations. We will be meeting next week with the taxi associations and also with the cooperative banks and many of the vendors associations in order that we can come up and tailor-make an economic support mechanism to keep them in business as much as possible. Certainly the decisions that we're going to make with the Bankers Association, I think will go a long way in being able to help the companies and also to be able to provide government from a macro support perspective. My government is also now looking at loans that we currently have and see how we can remodel some of those loans to be able to give the economic support to households, the vulnerable sector, small businesses and companies. So right after this 2-week period, the hope is that we can create a significant stimulus program to help everyone moving forward. So at this point, I wanted to give you an overall view, but to say to you that this is a scaling down of our commercial activity in the country. And this is about focusing on essential commercial businesses for the next 2 weeks. So at this point, I'm going to hand back over to Lisa. But we're all in this together. Your government is working very hard behind the scenes to ensure that we can come through this incredible crisis with as least amount of damage as we possibly can.
Thank you so much there, Honorable Prime Minister. We will go now to Mr. Brian Louisy, who is the Executive Director for the St. Lucia Chamber of Commerce. Lots of questions coming in, but we want to be able to take in Mr. Louisy as well as Tourism Minister before we can get to those questions, since your presentations are interlinked. Mr. Louisy?
Well, just to say that the business community is quite aware that all businesses have a role to play in minimizing the transmission of the COVID virus and also in supporting and working with their staff. And we also see ourselves as the big responsibility to work with all in this country as a nation, as a united people. And one of the conversations we've had with the Prime Minister is that we thought very early that our conversations and discussions, he should share it with the Leader of the Opposition. And he has done that. And this morning, the Leader of the Opposition was part of NEMAC and the discussion. And I think this is a signal where we're talking about everybody understanding that we are all going to feel pain. We all have to make our contribution. We all have to participate. And we have to work together, because if we don't address our first and most important issue, that of our people, as staff and as customers, there's no reason for what we're doing. This is about ensuring that after the economic impact, we are here as a people and we can move together. The business community will do as much as it can do. They will try to find creative ways to continue to support their staff. But we need the staff to also cooperate and collaborate. On the matter of the food issue, I want to reiterate, having spoken to our members and consulted with them, especially those who are importing, at this time, we are not seeing any problems with the food chain supply. What we're seeing is that the excessive and large consumption is putting pressure on the capacity to meet the demand at the level immediately. So the volume of food that is being consumed, being purchased, is putting pressure on the ability to supply. Not that there's a problem at the supply side. Our members are shopping the world to serve you. They're looking and they're finding those supplies, and they will bring them in. They've increased their orders. But people have to start to think, as the Prime Minister said, of how they consume and how they think of their fellow man. Ensure that the neighbor will also get an opportunity to purchase. So we are working very hard on that, and our members, we are trying to ensure that the critical services will operate. The members are putting themselves on the front line, and we want to thank the Ministry of Health and the staff of the CMO for the work they've been doing, and the other persons who are on the front line, because people in the banks, people who are serving customers also have their concerns about the transmission of the disease, yet they are out there. So we need to ensure that we appreciate what they're doing and that we continue to move forward together as a business community, and the business community and the St. Lucia Chamber of Commerce will continue to play its part in this process.
Thank you very much there, Mr. Brian Louisy. We now go to the Minister with responsibility for Tourism, Honorable Dominic Fedee.
Thank you, Lisa. Last time I addressed the fallout in the tourism industry, I reported that there was just one hotel which was facing imminent closure. Today, there are 15 and some 2,647 employees from the hotel industry. And then from the excursion sector, they are in the region of about 190 that have already been laid off. That brings a total from the tourism industry to some 2,784 in terms of total people who have been laid off. Hundreds more have been put on rotation, so it means that they're working less hours and are getting less pay. And then several hundreds have also received pay cuts in terms of the report that we have done at the Ministry of Tourism across some 22 of our main hotels. So this is really devastating on the employees of the tourism industry, on the investors and the management and then the owners of properties at this present time. As it pertains to the airlines, we anticipate, as hinted by the Prime Minister earlier, a significant reduction in our air capacity, although we have not received any official indication yet. We have received reductions from all of our airlines, and we don't believe that the airlines can continue to keep flying at a loss. So I think within the next 2 to 3 days, we will see a tremendous scaling down of the airlift capacity into our country. It is the hope that some lift will remain so that we can have access to some of the important markets in order for business and travel of St. Lucia nationals where necessary and essential. We began repatriating some 5,000 UK tourists earlier this week, and that process should be concluded with British Airways and Virgin Atlantic by the end of this month. The date that I have suggests the 24th of March is when we should complete that process. And then British Airways would cancel its flights. And it means that we would have no connection to the UK as a result of that. Reopening dates for hotels have been slated as early as May or June. And, you know, people are very optimistic but uncertain at the same time in terms of when the world is going to get a grip on this rather difficult situation, complex for a number of governments around the world. So no one really knows for sure whether those opening dates will hold. And then as well, with the disruption of our aviation industry, it becomes even more uncertain as to when those flights will come back and as to when we can reorganize the infrastructure that is necessary to get tourism going again. So those dates are rather cautiously optimistic. We expect more closures. More hotels are going to be closing their doors, especially in light of the travel restrictions placed by President Trump, heightening the global travel situation to level 4, which means to Americans you should absolutely not travel. In analyzing the cruise schedule for the year, if the world doesn't get a handle on this situation by September, it means that St. Lucia would lose as many as 90 cruise calls and visitors in the hundreds of thousands, and in terms of cash value in the millions that we will lose. This will have a devastating impact on our taxi drivers, on our vendors, on our jewelry stores, on our arts and crafts sector, and the list goes on. The ripple effect felt by this is going to be absolutely devastating. Already, as you talk to transportation companies, as you talk to manufacturers, and as you talk to a lot of the companies that are strongly trading with the hotel community, they will tell you that their business is significantly down. Some hotels are in the process of negotiating with utility companies and banks to see how they can get a reprieve on some of those obligations. The government even is going to be targeted for reprieve on some of their tax obligations, namely VAT as one of the main ones. As the Prime Minister indicated, this is a time where the hotel community has actually approached this with a spirit of goodwill. And I'm happy to reiterate that the two hotels which was mentioned in the Prime Minister's opening remarks are coming to the government at no cost with the lease. We're not being charged any rental fee, but those hotels believe that this is a time for all of us to put our hands together. This is a time for our country to hold hands and recover from perhaps one of its most difficult health crises that it has dealt with in recent history. And so it is very encouraging to see that the hotel community continues to approach it with that spirit of goodwill, of patriotism, and seeing themselves as part of the solution to the issues that are confronting us with COVID-19. We also have, so today we can announce Starfish, which is managed by the Blue Diamond Hotel, has been handed over. And also we want to thank the Sunswept Resort, a group of companies, for allowing us to use the facilities at Rendezvous. This is very timely, as we have today some 90 St. Lucians returning from Martinique. And so the first facility, Starfish, will be open at 7 p.m. tonight. And the Ministry of Tourism and the Ministry of Health are working together to get this facility ready and comfortable for the returning nationals that are coming. We anticipate during the course of the week as well, many St. Lucian nationals will be returning to our shores in a very high-risk part of the world, the United Kingdom. So those two facilities, which will give us about over 200 rooms, will come in handy for a managed quarantine and isolation process. We are talking to more hotels to expand the level of quarantine capacity that we have to deal with the situation in a manner that is responsible, so that we can properly curtail any potential spread of it. The economic impact, returning to that, is extremely devastating for a number of other sectors, including manufacturing, the distribution sector, the utilities sector. Government revenue is going to have an untold ripple effect. The tours sector, many of the boats that are owned by St. Lucian nationals, as highlighted earlier, the attraction sector, the agricultural sector is likely to receive a tremendous hit as well in the coming months. And as well, the creative economy that do so well within our hotel community are all going to see a tremendous decline in their businesses as a result of the sheer scale of decline that is taking place in the hotel industry. You know, this is moving so fast and it is so uncertain. In fact, in my discussion with one of our hotels, the day before, he said, well, we're going to ride this out and we will get through this, and we will stay as open as long as possible. By the time the travel restriction was announced from President Trump, it was a different story. We saw that company saw massive cancellations in the millions in terms of bookings to their respective properties. So we really cannot tell what's going to happen, how tourism is going to fare, but it's really a time of real concern for a number of our properties. The employees displaced, it's welcoming news, Mr. Prime Minister, to hear you talk about the government being in the process of designing a stimulus package of some sort, not just for tourism employees, but for other subsectors in the wider economy that will be no doubt affected because of this devastating crisis that is confronting us at this time. In terms of our marketing strategy, we're looking towards the future. We believe that we will come out of this and come out of this stronger and better as a destination. And we are looking to see how we can position St. Lucia to best take advantage of the opportunities that will come about as a result of the recovery. We continue to be cognizant and appreciative of the fact that at the moment, the health and safety of our country is number one, number two, and number three priority. And so at this point, we have put the commercial ambitions of our sector on the back burner, but also cognizant of the fact that by holding hands, by coming together as a country, that we will come out of this situation, no doubt. I thank you.
Thank you very much for that, Honorable Minister. We're now joined at the head table by the President of the St. Lucia Bankers Association and Jesus Carol Mangal. She has a statement to make to us as well.
Thank you, Madam Chair. The Bankers Association would like to assure the public that we know that there is a lot of anxiety, and we want to provide reassurance to the population as well as to the government and other business places that we stand ready to assist. So we have been monitoring what is happening, and we did start our social distancing way in advance. We also will be probably with a second association in the region to release a statement on social distancing and what we had implemented to assist with the spread, to avoid the spread of the virus. If you go into our banks, you will see the hand sanitizers at entry. You will see people wiping down our counters. You will see people cleaning up our ATMs. And also you will, the only negative part, if I may call it that, you will experience will be the service will be a little slower because our tellers have been encouraged to wash their hands periodically. Other than that, we have done everything possible to ensure that we play our part to avoid the spread of the disease. We have also prepared 2 position papers, one to do with the partial scale down, and we are also prepared with a position paper in the event there is a full shutdown. So today we will be sharing with you our position paper for a partial shutdown or partial scaling down of the non-essential commercial activity in our island. So first of all, our opening hours will be changing. We will be open from 8 to 12 noon, Monday to Friday. During that time, from 8 to 9, we will be servicing only the elderly and people who are at risk, and also people who are differently abled, as well as pregnant women. So we will have that period strictly for them. From 9 to 12, we will service the general public. During the time we are servicing the general public, we will also have a dedicated line, which we normally do for the elderly. We will have that for the persons who are on the front line in the essential services. We want to make sure they get in and out of our bank quickly. Our ATMs will continue running 24/7 as they normally do. They will be well stocked with brand new notes for fear of people being concerned about notes carrying the coronavirus. So as much as possible, we will work with the ECCB to ensure that we have new notes. They may not always be only new notes, but as much as possible, we will do our part. In terms of our corporate customers, our night depository services will continue. We will meet with them on individual basis to ascertain what are they, how often they would need the services, bearing in mind we will have to clear our traps with the night depository. Our online wires and payroll services will continue. bearing in mind that next week is supposed to be payday. So we want St. Lucians to know you will get paid once your employers send in your funds. We also will be open to ensure that card replacements, we are encouraging people to sign up for online systems, use the ABMs, so we will be providing you with your cards once you had signed up for one already. In terms of, well, cashing checks, the normal teller services will be available. In order to limit the number of persons coming into the bank to cash checks, one of the things we will be doing is we will be working with employers who are still open, noting that many will be closed, to ascertain if we can arrange to bring the cash for you instead of you sending people into the bank to come and cash a check, and then increasing the possibility of community spread. Another thing that we will be doing, I will also want to say what we will not be doing. We will not be doing general lending services. That does not mean if you want short-term financing, we cannot entertain you, but we can do a lot of that on the phone rather than face-to-face. We will also not be doing anything like an account opening where you come to open an account. Now is not the time for that. In terms of our actual staff, we will be looking at a shift system. So we will have one shift from 8 to 10:30 a.m. and we will have a second shift from 10:30 to 1 p.m. In terms of the crowd in the bank, the Prime Minister alluded to it, where he indicated that for smaller branches, we will have 10 people at a time, for bigger branches, 20. We're also looking at how we can maintain the crowd outside of the bank, because we don't want a case where we have them coming in 10 in the bank, but outside, they're still mixing up with each other. So we will see how best we can assist with that, and we are hoping the government can assist with the security part of that to allow that to work properly. In terms of, so this really is to do more with social distancing. One of the things I know everybody's anxious of is repayment of their loans, their commitments. Well, as the Prime Minister indicated, we had started talks with that. We've had meetings with the Prime Minister, we've had with the ECCB Governor, and the ECCB Governor also commended St. Lucia Bankers Association as being the only association who was at the forefront of this with the government, working hand in hand to see how best we can assist our nation. So as of today, the ECCB Bank licensed financial institutions met with the ECCB Governor, and the ECCB Governor indicated that the ECCB's opinion has evolved. Initially, the ECCB was advocating case-by-case basis. However, now that he has looked at case-by-case, he realized everybody may be case-by-case to some extent. So he's looking at across the board. However, banks are separate entities, and you may have some banks where you opt in or others where you opt out, but you have the choice as a client to contact the bank and indicate whether you want to avail of a moratorium or whether you're okay. So, but the main point is all banks will be able to facilitate you, whether it's for 3 months or 6 months. And as I said earlier, as time passes, we will reassess the situation and determine what we need to do next. Do we need to go to 9 months? Do we need to go to 18 months? Because there have been talk of that. The ECCB Governor also indicated we may look at countrywide, because St. Lucia may recover faster than another country. And maybe what we are doing today, by doing the scale down, may enable us to recover earlier than another country. So basically that is it from the point of the Bankers Association of St. Lucia.
Thank you so much there, Ms. Mangal, and I can tell you that a number of people online are doing the sigh when you spoke about the moratorium there on the loan payments. We'll be getting to that a little later on. We also have Ms. Marguerite Desir here with us, representing the St. Lucia Manufacturers Association. Ms. Desir?
Thank you, Lisa. For us as manufacturers, I think it's a great opportunity for us to actually deliver on what we've been promising. We have the capacity to especially the food manufacturing sector. We have the capacity to produce on demand. We also, in terms of quality, through our HACCP certification, our ISO, and also our local Bureau of Standards, we have, in terms of quality, we are already practicing a lot of the hygiene requirements. And with this new COVID-19 initiative for extra hygiene, we've implemented a lot of extra hygiene methods to ensure that our quality and in terms of all what we produce is of a high standard for our consumers. It's a great opportunity for people to support local. As you would have seen lately, it's the local manufacturers who has been our saving day. We run short of all the international brands in terms of toilet paper, in terms of sanitizer and other, chemical stuff. And I can tell you, our local manufacturers, we were here to actually deliver, and we have the capacity. We've made provisions for additional raw material to come in. Some of our raw materials are locally sourced, but some are sourced internationally, and we've made provisions. We have some great products. Some of the food products, we have Caribbean grains with flour, we have tenderoni with all our pastas. They have a very great line of products. So again, the demand has been very great for our manufacturers. And again, we will continue to produce as per demand or ahead of that, and we will also continue to export because our export markets are also demanding a lot of the products. So we are available. Obviously, we will try to give first priority to St. Lucia, but again, we have the capacity, so feel free. It's a great opportunity for us and the government. There's also an additional opportunity for additional staff. So some of the service sectors who would be laying off some staff, because our demand in manufacturing would be higher, it's a great opportunity so your staff could come in to source employment through the manufacturing sector to assist us all. Thank you.
Thank you very much there, Ms. Daisy. And we have our final presenter here with us. Before we get to the questions, I know that they come in fast and furious, and I hope we can get through as many of them as possible. We do have Mr. Sanovik of Destang, who is with the St. Lucia Hotel and the Tourism Association.
Thank you. Just a correction, it's now the St. Lucia Hospitality and Tourism Association. Thank you.
Old habits.
That's fine. So one of the main concerns for us in the hospitality sector, obviously these are unprecedented times, devastating impact on the economy and on the tourism sector in particular. And we're all very concerned, obviously, for the commercial impacts, but I think most of us have been primarily concerned for the impact on our employees. And we have been in discussions with the government about that, about what kind of support can be provided. But in the meantime, while there have been a number of hotels that have been closed, there are also a number of hotels that have been providing care and support and aid packages to their employees in the form of either rotation, paid leave, or even support for medical insurance premiums. And I know there are some others who are also looking at doing the same. And we continue to have discussions with the authorities on that as to what kind of support can continue to be provided, particularly when it comes to healthcare, because I think that's going to be very, very critical that employees maintain some sort of health insurance coverage over this very difficult time. And also counseling services. Some hotels are providing that as well, because I think the coronavirus might cause as much mental illness over the next few months, if we're not careful, as it will physical illness. We're also, seeing opportunities, of course, with displaced employees perhaps being redeployed into perhaps the manufacturing sector. There'll be a need for heightened security, and there are a lot of there are employees in the sector with experience in that field, maintenance workers as well. So we're definitely going to be working with public and private sector to see what we can do in the next few months in terms of supporting the reallocation perhaps of employees into other sectors that perhaps would need additional service at this time. I'm very encouraged by the cross-collaboration that I have seen really over the last few weeks and months between the different private sector agencies and public sector, and hopefully this is something that we'll continue and that we'll come out of this stronger. Hoteliers are the ultimate optimists. We always believe that the next turnaround is around the corner, and we know that it is. this is just going to be a very sharp corner, and it's going to take a little time to navigate through it. But we know that that turnaround will come, and that will come out of it stronger. We've got a great tourism product. The long-term demand for people wanting to travel is not going to go away, but we are going to have to adjust how we do things in the next few months and in the coming years. But we're very confident that that turnaround will come, especially if we work together. And of course, the SLHD's focus and the entire country's focus really should be primarily on the health and safety right now of our citizens. Because without that, there will be no tourism industry, there will be no tourism sector, and that will have an even worse impact on the economy. So we fully support what has been put in place so far. We're going to continue to work to implement it, and also to clarify any gray areas where there may be any. And hopefully I've mostly covered everything. But again, unprecedented times for our industry and for our sector, but we're all in this together, and we're in it for the long haul.
Thank you very much there, Mr. Destang, for that. Okay, let's try and get to the questions, as many as we can. We have a question here from NBC Television, the news desk. The U.S. and other countries, apart from closing their borders, have called back their nationals all around the world. We in St. Lucia, we have St. Lucians in the diaspora and those employed on cruise ships. Is there a plan to repatriate them?
Absolutely. We just spoke of people coming back from Martinique. And that plan is in keeping with a global plan. We've got people coming back on the flights from the UK as well. And we're working with our airlines and everyone to make sure that we bring our people home, yes.
Okay. And also follow up to that would be the St. Lucians working on the cruise ships, and perhaps the coming from regions that are most infected or affected rather. So how are we going to be dealing with these individuals once they arrive in St. Lucia?
We've been working through our foreign offices, our office in Miami, our office in Toronto, our office in New York, reaching out and determining who wants to come home, because not everybody wants to come home. So once they're prepared to come home, we're going to try to bring them home. And this is why it's very important for us to also appreciate. I hear some of the discussions outside in terms of the immediacy to want to shut down our borders. And I want to say that I completely understand that initial reaction. But to cut ourselves off completely from the world seems counter-cyclical to what we also want to be able to do. And so this is why, if in fact American Airlines and other US carriers do cut off services based on the level 4 rating that the US government has created globally, we are attempting to work with some regional carriers to at least have a service between St. Lucia and Puerto Rico, in which people can still be able to come in and people can go out. And when I'm not talking about tourists, we're talking about, you have companies here in the manufacturing sector that depend on technical expertise on the outside. If in fact we have people who have healthcare concerns that cannot be dealt with here, that happens. But we need to be able to have at least one portal available to do that. And this is why we're working with the CMO's office to make sure if we have one flight a day coming in, at least that keeps the opportunity available for our nationals to want to return home, and that when they come in, based on the advice of the CMO's office, in terms of what protocols we're going to put in. Are we going to put them into compulsory quarantine for 14 days? Whether they come from somewhere where we believe that we just have to wait for symptoms, but that's really going to be the determination of the CMO. But I think to completely shut ourselves off the world. So we've seen that Trinidad has made the unprecedented move of completely closing down its borders. Right? Martinique, because of the cases that are taking place, and the decision with their borders not made in Martinique. I'm sure if it was left to the Martiniquean authorities, they would have done everything to be able to at least keep emergency services available to St. Lucia, knowing our dependence on their healthcare system. But that's out of their control. And so therefore, as the Prime Minister and as health officers, we can't just cut ourselves off entirely. So it's to work responsibly. And I can say to you that when we were trying to keep the US carriers operating here, and we're really talking about 5 flights on American Airlines a week, possibly, I think it was Dominic that we were talking about, 3 flights on Delta and 1 flight on JetBlue. It was to work with the hotels we were the one asking them to potentially stay open for a little bit in order to make some commercial viability to allow those planes to continue flying. It wasn't the hoteliers who were the ones begging that we keep the door open all the time. So I just want to make it very clear that we need to be careful that sometimes that there are different perspectives of policy positions, but keeping the door slightly open, Lisa, is critically important for exactly a reason. People change their mind. They may become greater fare in Canada or greater fare in UK, and our nationals want to come home, and our policy, as the minister said, is that we will receive all our nationals, and working through the CMO office to be able to determine what protocols have to be placed to make sure they don't inadvertently, I don't want to use the word to contaminate, but to spread the virus here in St. Lucia.
Okay, we have a question coming from the Star newspaper, and you alluded to it, Prime Minister, earlier, but I think they're asking for a little bit of clarification or some expansion on that. Subsidizing employees who have lost their jobs and businesses. The question is, how would that be funded, and are we looking for the airport departure tax to be funding that? Is it a viable option, and is any form of stimulus package going to be utilized to counter the impact of the virus?
So very, very important question, and I think that people would have really liked us to have been able to articulate a position much quicker. And when you listen to what's taking place in some of the other countries, you know, it's 8 weeks, 9 weeks after the fact that people are coming out with stimulus programs. The OECS countries, and as in a country like St. Lucia, we have very few tools available to us to create liquidity. I think that's very important to be able to say, and for people to understand what I mean by that. So when you hear the Fed in the United States buying $200 billion in treasury bills, that's how liquidity is created in the marketplace. Our central bank has no tradition of buying our treasury bills and creating that level of liquidity. The level of liquidity will be in terms of the amounts that the banks are expected to hold as reserves, in terms of what their balance sheets must look like, in terms of the liquidity that they can provide, and then it's for the bank to pass on those benefits to the business people, to the government, and to individuals. We are going to have a Monetary Council meeting next week. In addition to that, our liquidity is also based on the ability to turn over our existing bonds and our treasury bills. So we have $700 million of bonds and treasury bills that we have to turn over this year. We had a very good conversation with the bankers, and the bankers are going to be working with us so that we can work with our clients to voluntarily convince them to turn it over. The good thing is that there's a precedence that was established after Maria in Dominica, and many of the regional institutions worked with Dominica to make that happen. So I've got to be able to be in a comfortable position to understand where that is, because any shortfalls will affect the liquidity within the government to do that. We do know that we're not going to be generating any new taxes from the tourism sector for a period of time. We also know that the manufacturers and some of the other entities here are going to want tax concession and tax breaks as well. So that's also going to affect the liquidity of the government. So it was very important for us to have the first part of the transition worked out. And I really want, again, to thank the Bankers Association for how quickly they came to the table, their understanding of the depth of the problem that we've had. And I also want to thank Governor Antoine. I mean, I've been having conversations with Governor Antoine for the last month now in anticipation of where we're going to go. And as was indicated by the Bankers Association, we've seen some shifting of hard-held positions by the central bank and understanding the gravity of the situation. So what does it mean? It means that we have to deal with all the persons that we operate with first. We have postponed the budget till the end of April. And by the time we get to the end of April, we'll have a much clearer idea on where the liquidity is going to be and how much resources can be made available. We are meeting with some of the entities that have approved loans to us, the Taiwanese government being the most important one, and to restructure those loans that we can use it now for budgetary support and for the Ministry of Health in particular. And once that is approved, then I will have the liquidity and we can announce specifically what we're going to do. But the intention clearly is to work to be able to provide some kind of salary support to a wide range of St. Lucians that we believe are going to be affected. We've had discussions with NIC. So NIC legally only provides coverage for persons that are sick. But we're working with them to see in these circumstances how we can expand that and to get them to be able to participate in that. Some of the hoteliers and some of the businesses that are being affected have also indicated, not all, but some, that if in fact government is going to put up some levels of money, they're prepared to try to match that money. So these are the initiatives that are taking place. I've had macro meetings this week, which was the banks, the chamber, and the primary private associations. Next week we'll be having meetings with the Vendors Association, the Taxis Association, the cooperatives, and to really start understanding in detail what the impact is going to be and what level of support they're going to require. So I would say to you by the end of next week, we're going to be in a much better position to articulate specifically what we're going to do. And that's why really the focus today was how do we curtail any potential outbreak of corona. That's the first battle that we have to achieve. Use this 2 weeks to be able to understand what we're going to do economically. But the Bankers Association has come to the table in terms of what they're going to do for the next 3 months with regards to principal and interest. I've met with Lucia. Lucia is currently in dialogues with Buckeye and also their oil suppliers and also some of the other suppliers to find out what concessions they can get from them and how they can pass those concessions on to the consumer. WASCO is also dealing with it on an individual by individual basis, but I believe what they have agreed to do is that anybody currently who owes a disconnection fee, that they're going to waive that to allow them to get reconnected ASAP. But we are asking the people that can afford to pay their electricity bill, the people who can afford to pay their water bill, to do so. There's not an endless supply of resources, and in doing that, you're helping those entities to be able to help some of the people that are in a greater need.
We do have a question for the Bankers Association, wanting some clarification on the moratorium. If you can explain exactly what it means, and does it apply to other lenders on the island as well?
Thank you very much. So the moratorium that is being discussed by the Bankers Association, the Bankers Association includes all the commercial banks in St. Lucia as well as a few of the non-bank financial institutions. The moratorium that is being considered by the Bankers Association would extend to retail, specific mortgages and vehicle loans, as well as corporate small business customers. And in the first instance, we're looking at 6 months. So these loans would require monthly payments by customers. So the expectation is that those payments would be deferred as requested or as required by the customers. And in some cases, banks may require you to pay maybe interest only, or you would have to look at, as Carol would have indicated, each bank operates slightly differently. But as far as possible, we will try to accommodate those customers and ensure that those payments are deferred, in addition to which late fees that may normally be applied to those facilities, whether it be credit card or mortgages, banks would look at deferring or removing or reversing those late charges as well for customers.
Okay, and so it remains a sort of case-by-case basis.
Yes, because we recognize that some customers may have different circumstances. While we expect maybe the vast majority of customers would require some sort of support from the financial institutions, there may be some customers who would prefer to continue making the payments for their mortgages and or their loans, and we would facilitate that type of arrangement. But customers who really need the support, the banks would provide them with the support, removing the requirement for monthly payments on those loans until such time as they're in a position to do so.
Okay.
We would expect that there'd be 6 months or thereafter.
Thank you very much. Quick question to the Minister for Tourism Creative Industries. We do have coming from Kendall Eugene, Blazing FM, and The Voice newspaper. Nothing has been heard about Carnival, St. Lucia Carnival, and there's much uncertainty around overseas. Has a decision been made pertaining to Carnival?
Well, we met with the Carnival fraternity earlier this week, and there was a proposal from them to postpone the event because of the uncertainty of the July date. They would need a lot more time to figure out a really good space as to when they can do this. I think that the proposal was welcomed, I believe, by the Minister of Culture and Creative Industries, Mrs. Honorable Fortuna Belrose, who leads that charge. And I think that we are in agreement with it to put the event off. I think it helps the Ministry of Health to give them the time necessary to be able to deal with what is one of our most uncertain health catastrophes that we have faced in recent history. And so I would say that the Minister would certainly be back in touch with the Carnival fraternity in short order. But the July date is not going to work. And I think the bands have appreciated that as well. But in the Carnival fraternity, they did explain that there are a number of bookings. A lot of their events are sold out. And so I think they were concerned about the economic impact it was going to have on them as well. But as we stated earlier, the health of our people and our country would be the prevailing priority as we deal with this crisis.
Thank you very much.
If I could just add to that,
Yes.
you know, it's a very bitter pill to swallow. And I want to really assure our business people and entertainers in the creative industry how valuable that business is. But the practical reality is we don't even know whether hotels are going to be open. We don't know if there's going to be airplanes flying.
Correct.
And so that level of uncertainty where people are having to book in advance creates this vacuum. So I think until there is some certainty in the marketplace, I would really strongly suggest to them that they don't commit to a date. I think that within the next 8 weeks, we will have a much clearer idea as to where we're going to be and the possibility of when we think business is going to reopen. And once we've done that, I can assure them that we would use Carnival as a major catalyst to be able to reopen our solution product. And we're hoping that we can get patience from them and their understanding, and for them never to doubt for one moment the appreciation that we have in them and where we've taken this industry and the impact, the economic impact it's having on solution.
Okay. We do have a question out of Loop, St. Lucia, Loop SLU. It wants to know at what stage would you, Prime Minister, contemplate a complete shutdown of the island? What will it take for you to follow the suit alongside the other prime ministers of the region?
But St. Lucia has.
I think they're specifying total shutdown.
But I think that we've answered that question. We have no flights from Canada, no flights from the UK. The shutdown has been in process. The only area that we were looking to try to keep a flight coming into, and as I explained, it's not about tourism or commercial, it's about reality. You know, if now we have 0 flights coming into St. Lucia, which is probably going to be the case for the next 8 weeks unless we're able to get something flying, nobody can come in. But that also means it's going to put a significant constraint on our business community, but even more importantly, the solutions who are not affected health-wise by corona, who can't get help here. What are they going to do? So the fact is it's not really realistic in my mind to completely close down, but I want to make that distinction. Nobody's talking about keeping the borders open to keep hotels open. That's not even been remotely what we've been doing. Anything that we've been attempting to do, particularly as I said, that Trinidad and Tobago has closed the door on us. Martinique, I've spoken to President Marie-Jean. He didn't want that to happen. But that policy has been driven from France. And so therefore, where are we going to go? And so to keep some portal open, I think, makes sense to everybody. And I think that when we've spoken to people and they understand what the government's position is, that's very clear. And you know, sadly, we still have people who want to go out there and interpret policy in a different way. And I'm really asking people to refrain from that. We've, I think, been very clear always that we're the leaders in limiting access to St. Lucia. We took some difficult commercial decisions early. We were one of the first. And I really want to thank the CMO, and I'm sure it's when it's her turn to speak that she's going to reiterate. There's never a time that the health department has come to my cabinet and made a recommendation that we have not fully supported her, regardless of what the business fallout is going to be. And I have taken some serious personal abuse on holding to those decisions. And that's why it's very clear in my mind, we have never capitulated on putting the health of this country first. But the decision or the policy to try to keep some level of opportunity for solutions to come in, if they decided a late stage, to support technical support for in my manufacturing sector, for my industry in general, and also that anyone who needs some health needs that we can't do here, they still have that opportunity to get it in and out. I think that's a completely different perspective, and I'm hoping that solutions would appreciate and realize that government is doing this for the betterment of our country and for the safety of our country, not for commercial benefit.
Okay.
If I can also say that it's important that we're not emotional in our response to this crisis. My understanding is, and the CMO can correct me, our 2 cases are imported cases that we know that have come from British tourists. Secondly, a lot of the testing that we have done to ascertain whether there have been transmissions from communities spreading, I think there are over 100 of them, and they've mostly come back negative.
They all came back negative.
They all came back negative. And so, therefore, it means that there is no evidence so far that to support any assumption that there's any community spreading amongst our people. And so, therefore, I think that calls or a response to a shutdown must be premised based on those facts.
Okay. And a good time now for the CMO to chime in. Dr. Sharon Belmar George, perhaps you can answer this question, CMO. We have a number of questions regarding the public transportation sector and how the bus drivers are dealing. What is the direction being given? Passengers want to know how many persons are allowed to be on a bus at any given time.
The recommendation for the transportation sector is to scale down on those services, and it will be limited just to facilitate the essential services from managing. So guidelines have been sent to indicate a reduction in the number of persons on the bus, also in terms of the use of hand sanitizer on the bus, and also the necessary infection control measures that have to be used on the bus to protect the bus driver and the passengers on the bus.
Okay, we have a few questions coming in from Choice TV, and I'll take one from our social platform here to preface this. The persons returning from Martinique this weekend, beginning this evening, one individual wants to know, is it mandatory to quarantine at the hotels? Can they decide to self-quarantine?
Okay, I would like not to highlight that it is only Martinique being quarantined and isolated. It is persons coming from different regions that we think are high risk for the COVID-19 virus. So quarantine is mandatory based on our travel restrictions and also our public health regulations. The numbers coming in today and on Sunday are quite big. So we will be in the initial phase, everybody will be under quarantine at the hotel. There we will be doing the necessary triage and screening, and moving forward a decision will be made. But everyone coming from areas of high risk will be quarantined.
There seems to be a reluctance by people to want to quarantine. In fact, the numbers we saw from Martinique suggested there were 140. when our consulate in Martinique suggested, well, when you return home to St. Lucia, it is mandatory to be quarantined, the number reduced to 90.
You don't want to be quarantined. CMO, we have been asked to explicitly state the procedures for isolation and quarantine. It's still not clear in the minds of the public.
Okay, for quarantine, we have different options. Now, quarantine relates to persons with a travel history of a risk area in the last 14 days. And those are persons who have not developed signs and symptoms yet. We, in the initial stage, we were given the option of home quarantine, and there are certain conditions that you need for home quarantine. That is, having a room and a bathroom that's separate from the rest of the house. So how we had managed it, if you have the capacity for home quarantine, we allowed it, and we did twice daily checks and screens of persons for the 14 days. Those who did not have that capacity for quarantine, we have a relationship with a guest house where we would put persons there and monitor them during the 14 days. Now, for isolation, those are persons who are a suspect case. That is someone
minibus transportation,
who has a history of travel and develops signs and symptoms. And those persons we house in the isolation unit at the Victoria Hospital, because those persons would be tested as well. Based on the numbers coming in, as we have quite a bit of returning nationals, it would then, the period during which our team would have to go into the homes, do that review, it makes it very short. And also, the level of risk from some countries have increased. So for this reason, a lot of the persons who've been coming during this week and into the weekend, we are instituting quarantine at the hotel. And there you'll be screened, your temperature would be taken, and we'd be able to monitor you for a period of 14 days from the hotel. It would mean a lot. Imagine you have almost 200 persons all over the country, and you're trying to monitor them twice a day for their temperature. This is human resource exhaustive, especially in the first instance. So it would make it easier for us to be able to monitor and also to provide care when needed in a timely manner as well.
The use of Victoria Hospital as the respiratory respiratory center, is that equivalent to saying that it's an ICU facility?
Victoria Hospital will be used for our patients that are confirmed with COVID-19 and who need hospitalized care. The hospital is scheduled to move next week from the 25th to the 27th in preparation for this. Victoria Hospital also has the capacity for ICU care.
Okay.
Lisa, just in news just coming to hand, little submission here from our Minister of Transportation. Just to address one of the earlier questions, he has confirmed that he has been in discussions with the National Commission on Public Transportation, and will be making a settlement next week on the transportation and the licensing department. So I think as it pertains to the number of people that will be allowed to travel with the minibuses.
Wonderful news there. Someone was about price gouging, Prime Minister. How are we going to ensure that this does not become something very prevalent?
Well, a lot of our products are under price control. And we are also going to be looking to add some products to our price control regime. We will be going to Parliament probably not this week, but the following week, and the amendments to the specific laws to help support that. I have to say that many of the businesses, if not all, have been acting very responsibly. The entities that have been acting irresponsibly is individuals who are going in and buying large quantities of items and then selling them. And so this is what we have to be able to prevent from happening, because it's affecting the food chain. And as I'm saying, that there's unnecessary panic. There is sufficient food and products to go around. And in particular, if individuals start rationing how they're consuming items, that's also going to be able to extend and go lower. So there's two benefits to rationing. One is to be able to reduce your cost and also to make sure that there is a fair distribution of products in St. Lucia. We should have zero problems in being able to supply the needs of our country. But if individuals are going in and buying large quantities and then onward selling those, it's creating additional panic and unnecessary panic. So I very much support the decision by the grocery chains to now put a quota system on. We have had a meeting and discussion with the police to assist in being able to make sure there's enforcement of that. And I'm really asking people in St. Lucia to cease and desist from doing that. This is the wrong time to be trying to take advantage of people. There's too many uncertainties that exist in the country today for people to be able to be doing that kind of behavior.
Okay, so in about a minute, Prime Minister, if the farmers want to know what exactly is the plan and how the government is engaging them at this time.
So the Minister of Agriculture is going to be extending a hand out to them, and again, that's going to be one of the meetings that we're going to be having next week in terms of understanding. So for instance, the new hotels that are coming in, to be able to supply products to them. Again, Sanovik talked about this, the talent that exists in the hotel sector, which is going to be dormant for the next couple of months, is to use that. So in terms of soup kitchens with the great chefs who really have mastered the art of being able to very cost effectively feed people, is to now see the talent of them and the talent of our farmers to be able to grow. So we want to have a meeting with the grocery store chains as well as the farmers to try to understand the demand, what products that we can look at being able to substitute. So Margaret was 100% right. This is a tremendous opportunity for us to build on the nationalism and the pride that we've been building over the last 2 years since our 40th anniversary, right? We're all in. Let's buy St. Lucian. Let us put ourselves first. And this is some of the changes that we could make, because in addition to buying locally, which is healthy food, you're also helping to support a farmer that may have lost his contract to a hotel. And we're going to be working aggressively to make sure that we support them. What's taking place in the banana sector? I mean, very difficult times with what's happening with Windfresh, and we're still dealing with that issue. We believe there's going to be a significant market for our bananas. But obviously with what's going on in the UK, we have to hold everybody's hands at this particular point. So a very important sector, and we will be working with them. So that's what we're going to be doing this week. My farmers, my fishermen, our farmers and our fishermen, my apologies, our vendors, our taxi associations, our cooperative banks, because we've met with the larger commercial banks. There are many more entities that we need to make sure we hear their voices, hear their particular concerns, and that we're going to deal with it. So I don't want to be premature in announcing a massive stimulus program, and then everybody says, what about me? So we believe that we really have a 2-week window right now to be able to finalize the programs and make sure we get it right.
Thank you very much, the Honorable Prime Minister Alan Chastanet. Thank you to all the members of the head table who participated and gave the very, very pertinent information there to St. Lucia. Well, it has been a marathon session, and as I told you...
If I can just maybe interrupt you for 1 second, if I don't mind, and I really apologize. I just want to re-emphasize a couple of things in terms of that this is not a shutdown of our country. This is to close non-essential commercial services. And the services that are going to remain open, both in the public sector and the private sector, is to scale them down in order to give the country the best chance to make sure we have zero community transmissions in our country. Part of what we're going to be doing to do that is when we start this process on Monday, we're also going to be imposing a curfew. So the curfew will be from 11 o'clock at night until 5 o'clock in the morning in the first instance. I have asked the Attorney General's office and the CAPSEC to prepare the necessary legislation to authorize the government to impose that curfew. So I just want to say that the curfew is really being done for 2 reasons. One clearly is to enforce the social distancing that we're doing. So bars and restaurants are shut. People need to be back in their home and not gathering into large crowds. And secondly, by closing down certain commercial offices, we have to make sure that people's properties remain safe, and certainly to discourage anyone from believing that they can take advantage of this situation. There will be applications that companies could make if their employees are going to be working past the curfew period, and certainly security people, etc., that they're going to have to get their badges from NEMO in order to be able to be out past the curfew. But I think it's an important message that I want to be able to. Lastly, the country is shut down. We shut down the cruise industry. We've shut down small crafts from coming into St. Lucia. We have imposed, like the rest of the world, 14-day mandatory curfews. We are trying to keep one porthole, quarantine, my apologies. 14-day mandatory quarantine from certain countries in the world, which in essence has eliminated the ability for tourists to come to this country. But we are trying to keep a portal open for solutions who want to get out, as well as for solutions who want to come in. And I hope that I can be able to announce very soon what that exactly is going to be. But it's certainly something that we think is necessary to be able to move forward. So again, these are some of the critical things I wanted us to be able to remember in the meeting today. So this is a partial and a scaled down closure of
there, Mr. Prime Minister. As I was saying, it has been a very lengthy session, and we want to say thank you so much for watching. There's a lot of information that was given out, and you can review all of that information on our replay on the National Television Network, NTN, where it is also posted on Facebook, the YouTube channel, so that you can review at your leisure. I'm Lisa Joseph. We'll see you back here at 4 o'clock for our next live segment.